Hey friends, welcome to episode 478 of the My 123 Cents podcast. I am Kevin Huntsberger. And if you're watching on video, um, you may notice this. Yes, my left arm is currently, and probably for the foreseeable future, uh, in a sling. And I am actually going to tie this in. This is an Ask My 123 Cents. I'm going to tie this in to a question at the end of this week's podcast, of this week's show. But long story short, um, gosh, probably 6, 7, maybe 8 weeks ago now. It was sometime in November. I was doing push-ups. I'd gotten into a routine of doing 100 push-ups a day, and as I was doing them one night, I heard a pop. I'm like, I'm 50. Things creak and crack and pop and make noises now. It'll be fine. And I kept going. And I didn't feel any pain, didn't experience any pain. Well, fast forward to December 27th. It was 2 days after Christmas. I was moving a big piece of furniture to our outside pool deck area, foolishly by myself. And in the process, I guess, tore, partially at least, tore my left bicep. This sucks because I am left-handed. Uh, and what sucks even more is it is, as I'm recording this, January 14th. I can't get in to get an MRI. I've seen a doctor, my primary care physician or physician assistant in this case. She looked at it. She thinks it's a partial tear, but we won't know anything for sure until I get an MRI, which lovely insurance and rigmarole and all that BS that you have to deal with. Uh, we're looking at February 8th before I can even have an MRI done. And then once the MRI is done, I can't see a doctor about that until February 26th, I think. So this is going to be a long process, and it's hurting. I mean, I'm wearing the sling for one because it does provide some relief, and two, I don't want to overuse this and aggravate it and go from a partial tear to a full tear or rip it or whatever and have to get surgery. As it stands right now, at least according to my physician assistant, I'm looking at not having to have surgery, and that's the goal here is to make it the next, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks or 6 or 7 weeks and not need surgery. So fingers crossed that we can get through this and move on and get into spring and summer and be sling and cast and all that free. So I know if you're not watching, you had no clue, and I've literally told nobody about this. I've just kind of been wearing my sling, and then people stop me and say, "What's going on?" And I've only been to a couple of cheer competitions, which you can see by my shirt and the stamp on my hand. Anyway, I digress. It is my 123 cents. It is Ask My 123 Cents. And before we get too far into the weeds with the questions, which shout out to those who did ask questions, I appreciate it. I'm grateful for it. Next week, Chad will be my guest, and we will be talking all about Hulk Hogan and some alternatives to Hulkamania. So I'm looking forward to that conversation because it falls right before the 40th anniversary of Hulkamania. Speaking of anniversaries, today, as I'm recording again on January 15th, it is 12 years ago that I met this guy. Yeah, it's Neville, but we know him, or I knew him back then as Pac. He and Colt Cabana and El Generico and Matt Cross were all part of an AAPW wrestling event here in Southern Illinois. It was my debut match. I also got to call the match between Pac and El Generico. It's a great experience, and it was a fun-filled night that really uh, was an experience that I never thought I would have. And then being able to have the in-ring experience again multiple times has just been something that has been surreal to me. It's been like a pinch me moment, a wake me up, this is a dream kind of thing. So thanks to Chris Hagstrom and Golden Boy Greg Anthony and Sean Chambers for making all of that night possible and making that happen. And then Heath Hatton, shout out to him too, because he kind of took me and showed me a few things because I had not been in the ring at all, hadn't done anything in the ring. Um, and he showed me a few things to prepare for and get ready for on that night. So again, I'm grateful for those opportunities. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this podcast. And Royal Rumble season right around the corner. I believe the event is 2 weeks from tonight as we're speaking. I will have more details on the My 123 Cents Facebook page, so be sure to please check that out and take a look. I put it out there last week. Would people be willing to buy in to a Royal Rumble contest? And lots of responses. Lots of people said yes. So we are going to proceed and move forward with that. It's going to be $5 per entry. And I think what I'm going to do once I make the official announcement, so don't respond yet, but once I make the official announcement, I'm going to put it out there and people, as they buy their spots, I'm going to go in the order that people buy them. And then you will be that person that I will draw the numbers, and then that will be your number. So I'm going to do a Facebook Live with it. It's going to make sense. I know I'm trying to articulate it here. It will all make sense once I put it together and do it. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't know. I could be wrong. We've not done this before. Chad and I have talked about doing Royal Rumble contest before, and always think about it right before the event, and it's too late. So I thought about this the other night. I was sitting at a basketball game, and I'm like, Royal Rumble contest. I need to get it out there. Excuse me. And so it is out there, and we will be doing it. I've decided that it's $5 per entry, so that's $5 for the men's, $5 for the women's. If all 30 spots get filled, that's $150. The winner, whoever the winner of the Rumble, whoever their number is, will get $100, or I think it's 66% of the pot. So if we don't get everybody, every 30, all 30 spots, so it'll be 66% of the winnings will go to the winner, and then the remainder will go to the My 123 Cents action figure drive. So I had contemplated and debated. I am going to do it again in 2024, which also brings me to another thing, and this may put a monkey wrench in things. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot, though, in the last week or two, and again, this is not a conversation I've had with anyone, but up here in my brain. Episode 500, as I've mentioned, is coming in June. And I thought about, once episode 500 hits, what is next? What is, obviously 1,000 would be great. Then there's, incrementals of 600, 700, 800, 900, but 500 and 1,000 are those real big milestones. It's been but when we get to the anniversary or to the episode 500, it'll be 9.5 years of doing the My 123 Cents podcast, a wrestling podcast, typically retro wrestling podcasts, looking back and remembering and sharing those experiences, but talking about current stuff too. But I've debated, do I keep going? Do I keep going with the My 123 Cents, with the wrestling format, or do we start over with something brand new? I've had ideas for other shows, but just not having the time to do multiple shows is the biggest reason why I've not pursued that. So I would like your opinions. If you think that My 123 Cents is a wrestling podcast moves forward, or do I launch a new show with a new format, maybe a co-host, and talking about wrestling from time to time, but the primary focus would not be on wrestling? Let me know what you think, because I do this show, one, because I do have fun doing it, but I'd like to know what other people think and gather some opinions that way. So weigh in and let me know. So this week, as I mentioned, it was the month of January is insanely busy with my daughter's cheer. This is her senior year. So, not that it matters that it's her senior year, but my wife and I being make it to all of the games and all of the competitions. And the month of January, every weekend is a cheer competition. So last weekend we were in Chicago, this weekend in Breeze, Illinois, which is only about 90 minutes from here. So we were able to make it back and forth. I was going to record on Saturday night when we got back, but I was just kind of drained. And this arm thing, it's kind of got me bogged down, and it's messing with my head too. So I was kind of in a pissy mood and didn't feel like doing it. And so obviously it's Sunday night, and it's got to get done because the show drops at midnight on Martin Luther King Day, by the way. And if you are listening on MLK Day or even beyond, do something nice for someone today. Do something in memory and honor of Dr. King and keeping that legacy of moving things forward. So, um, and just being better humans and better people, better friends, better family members, better sons or daughters or husbands or wives or cousins or aunts or uncles or brothers or sisters or friends, just whatever it is. And I could certainly do better in my pursuits as well. So, but anyway, talked about the Royal Rumble. We've talked about MLK, and I have talked about my busy schedule next week and the weekend after. But Chad and I are going to get together in this upcoming week to knock out the Hulkamania episode, which, I know some will find that polarizing, and it's not intended to be, but I'm ready for the backlash that may potentially come along with it. I don't think it will be, though. Most of my listeners are pretty non-vocal. They don't get mad and whatnot. But I want to change that. I want you to speak up and let me know what you think of the show. Rate and review on your favorite podcasting app. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a review here as well. And all of that goes a long way for me. But weigh in and let me know what you think about after episode 500. What happens next? The next week do episode 501 and keep moving forward with the wrestling, or do we launch a new show? I don't even have a name for it, a format, a co-host, any of that. I've got ideas, but I haven't executed or moved in any way yet because, like I said, this was about 2 weeks ago. I started thinking about it, and then I thought maybe I'll put it out there and see what other people think. I'd love to have the time and the effort or the energy to put multiple shows out, but I don't, at least not at this point in my life. Maybe next year when my daughter goes off to school, actually in the next few months, maybe by episode 500, I could keep my 1, 2, 3 cents going and then do a side show as well. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, it is time for Ask My 1, 2, 3 cents, and I did make the mistake of saying ask anything because I figure people may have other questions beyond the wrestling world, which I don't mind answering those either. After spending 22 years in TV news, people have questions and comments and want to know things. And excuse me as I lean down to get a drink here. And if you're watching, again, I'm not drinking anything red. This is one of those cups that turns different colors when you put cold in it. And this is just a glass of ice water. But Greg Mahochko, who is the founder of the Jittery Monkey Podcasting Network, someone who I am grateful for being a part of this. And again, I guess the conversation with him would come into place too if and when the My 1, 2, 3 cents podcast goes away and something new. It would still be housed here at Jittery Monkey. But we'll talk about that when the time comes. But he asks about the legacy of the United States. What's our greatest achievement? And then what is our legacy? Is it positive or negative? I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. I was going to have some snarky, funny little wrestling-related answer saying, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes or Sergeant Slaughter or Hulkamania are our greatest achievements. But I think that there's just a lot of good things and a lot of things that could be and should be and maybe will be changed in our great country. But our legacy, I don't think is a negative one. I think that if we continue to focus or try to find the things that are positive and not let the naysayers, the people keep things negative or keep us down, we'll be in good shape. So again, I don't want to get overly political here. There's, I've seen friendships and people dissolve relationships over politics, and I don't want to make this a political thing. So, Greg, I know you were being a funny guy with the question, but I that's my best answer for right now. Chad asks, do you think wrestlers should earn title shots with victories or just be able to show up after not being on TV for a year and get a title match? And this is obviously a thing with the whole Jinder Mahal situation. Jinder Mahal on the New Year's Day edition of Monday Night Raw, The Rock came out If you haven't seen it, you've been under a rock yourself. But I think this is a jab. Chad and I kind of go back and forth from time to time about AEW and WWE. In my opinion, I think that maybe WWE is trolling Tony Khan. I don't know. Tony Khan, in my opinion, and again, it's my opinion, and I know that, again, tribalism in wrestling has gotten to a point it's almost as bad as politics, and people stop talking to each other and get pissed off and get bent out of shape. But listen, Tony Khan, in my opinion, has been for quite a while now behaving like a child on social media. His rants, his raves, the things he says, I think he does it partially for attention. I think he does it to kind of stir the pot and see where he's going to get with it. I hope and pray that he doesn't believe all the bullshit that he puts out there, but maybe he does. But for someone who is a billionaire, who is the owner, who runs this company, I don't think it's a good look. And I know that Vince McMahon has had his, ups and downs and whatnot as well. But I don't ever remember Vince getting on social media and acting a fool, and saying some of the outrageous and outlandish things. And so, who cares if Jinder Mahal is getting a title shot? If I'm running my own company, trying to fix my Neville figure here. If I'm running my own wrestling company, I would certainly not be tweeting about the competition and getting title shots. And we saw this with the whole John Cena Undertaker thing from the NXT episode. It's just bizarre to me. Like, to me, focus on your product, make it better. It's not ever. I honestly think that there's too much time. WWE has a 60 or 50-year head start, billions of dollars. Now they're part of TKO. It's so big. It's not going to be overtaken. It's just not. So, and nor why would we want it to be? Let's just move on and have great, solid alternatives, whether it's TNA, whether it's Impact, or Impact is TNA, AEW, or New Japan, or Ring of Honor, or whatever the case may be. Just be happy that there are products, there are places out there for our favorites who get let go from WWE to go and still continue to flourish and make a living. But and people talk about the tribalism, and I think a lot of it comes from Tony Khan's idiotic, moronic post that he makes on Twitter specifically, or X, and doubling down and going all in, pun intended, I guess, with some of those things. So I really wish that would stop being the focus. Tony Khan would stop having this, for lack of a better word, hard on for WWE, and just move on and produce and focus on, his own product, his own people. How one time you can say that you were fearing for your life backstage at your own show with the CM Punk situation, to a month or two later saying that your company is the safest in the world and yada yada yada. He's like a politician. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. But again, the question wasn't about Tony Khan. It was the question about title shots. Listen, it's all a work. Who cares? We know that The Rock's going to roll in and be in the main event. I'm kind of backpedaling now on what I said on YouTube last week or 2 weeks ago about The Rock coming in. It's not going to happen in an Elimination Chamber, or at least it seems like it's not, because Roman's not wrestling in Elimination Chamber. I still think there's a possibility Roman loses the title at Royal Rumble. We'll talk more about that as it gets closer. But I think also there's a possibility that we get Rock Roman night 1 of WrestleMania, and Cody Roman, or Royal Rumble winner and Roman, at night 2. So there's still some scenarios and possibilities out there. Should wrestlers earn title shots? I mean, even back in the day, back in the 80s, you would see some jabroni get a shot against Arn Anderson for the television championship, or there'd be an enhancement. Man, I can remember Johnny Rods wrestling Hulk Hogan on an episode of Superstars or Challenge or one of those shows. Randy Savage when he was defending the Intercontinental title. Did these guys earn a title shot? Of course not. They're enhancement matches, and so I get Chad was again being cute with his question, like Greg was, and I should probably have not given it this much attention. But I'm saying all that to say is let's just enjoy wrestling and the entertainment and not because again I think the tribalism it hurts everyone top to bottom and if WWE is trolling Tony with this it's silly, but I certainly hope that they don't rewrite their plans or change their plans and put the belt on Jinder because he was nowhere in the forecast for a championship win. Even if he wins it and then loses it right back, that'd be kind of silly to me. But again, it's wrestling. We see pettiness and silliness all the time. So who's to say for sure? My man Ken Johnson coming up with 5 great questions this week. And he starts off with the likes of Paul Bearer, Bobby Heenan, Jimmy Hart, and Paul Heyman aside, will wrestling today see another manager of that caliber? Now, of course, Heyman is still very active. We haven't seen MVP in a while. I liked that they started to kind of bring managers back into the fold. One of my favorite things about 80s wrestling and even early to mid 90s wrestling was the manager. The ones that he mentioned, Bobby Heenan and Jimmy Hart, Classy Freddie Blassie, Mr. Fuji, Slick, Elizabeth, Sensational Sherry, Paul Bearer. We had all these great managers. And I think back at that time, wrestlers who couldn't speak for themselves, so to speak, needed that mouthpiece. And there were some baby faces that needed that mouthpiece that they just simply didn't talk. They just got in there and wrestled. I think somewhere along the way, the focus became more on being the total package, not Lex Luger, but just being the total package of being able to get in there and wrestle, also being able to get in there and speak for yourself. And maybe the need for the manager kind of went away. But again, I would love there to be a resurgence of the manager. I know that we went through a time in the Attitude Era when the tits and ass was a big thing, and we would see Sonny and Terry and Sable and the women coming out as managers or valets, and then that all kind of went away as well. I definitely think Ric Flair. I don't really look at him right now as a manager for Sting, as more of a second. But I could have seen him being a manager type, and maybe he will be. I know that he commented a while back about managing his son-in-law, Andrade, but I believe Andrade is now gone from AEW. So I think that we could certainly see some of these retired wrestlers, instead of coming back and being a general manager or an authority figure, putting them in a managerial role. And I think, and I don't know if MVP was hurt or if Omos was hurt, but we haven't seen him in a while, or at least I haven't. So I thought MVP did a pretty good job as a manager. I don't think that, just because I think that the audiences have changed and things have changed, but that's not to say that it can't evolve back or revolve or move back to that time where we have managers. I don't know how today's crowd feels about that. I know Triple H with WWE in some regards is old school, but I think he's modern in his thinking as well. But again, I'd love to see it happen, and I think that it could with the right people, with the right mix of, because Bobby Heenan and Freddie Blassie and Mr. Fuji, you think of those guys, they were wrestlers as well. But then Slick and Jimmy Hart and Paul Bearer were managers. They were brought in as managers. And I think if we could evolve back to that and find those talents that could come in and be a good mouthpiece and have a presence outside of the ring, it would be a pretty darn amazing thing. What is the worst wrestling skit, like channel changing? For him, it was the Vince McMahon "Kiss My Ass" skits. And he asked this question days ago, and I had thought about it, and I really didn't come up with a specific answer for it. I think probably though for me might have been also during the Attitude Era. I hated it when they would do, they being WCW, um, would do the when Eric Bischoff was giving away results, and I know that wasn't really a skit, but when they would call out or make fun of WWE, and the same thing with WWE with the billionaire Ted skits. Uh, to me, it didn't serve any purpose. Was it channel changing? Maybe not, but I didn't like the way the war was going. To me, it would have been more entertaining if they would have just gotten in there and done their thing and tried to be the better show, either side. But these kind of cheap shots and stuff, to me, and I know that without it, it probably wouldn't have invigorated and turned things the way that it did. So maybe that was a good thing that these things happened. But for me as a fan back at the time, I was not a fan, and I'm not a fan of it today with the little quips back at the comments of WWE, the slams from AEW, and I know WWE every once in a while punches down and makes a comment as well. Uh, that would be probably the thing, and I know that sometimes these aren't always planned. Cody destroying Triple H's or the throne with the sledgehammer. I thought that was petty and kind of dumb. So, um, but back in the '80s, I mean, there was a lot of cheesy. I just kind of glanced over and I saw all my the late great Killer Khan here, my old WWF cards from back in the '80s, and it reminds me of like the George the Animal Steel skits when he was going through shock therapy. Uh, back then they were kind of funny and whatever, but I was 12 or 13 years old, and looking back on it now, it's like kind of like, ugh, these were goofy as hell. So Katie Vick is another one. I wasn't a big fan of that whole thing, and I'll tell you, probably one of the worst of all time was the Claire. I can't even remember what her name was. The Claire stuff on Impact on TNA with AJ Styles and Dixie Carter and Claire, whatever her name. Oh my gosh, I thought that stuff was horrible too. What is the hardest move to sell in wrestling? For me, this is from Ken again. For me, is the drop kick. So many people do it, but few sell it. I'm not exactly, I don't know the best answer for this one, but I think that, and it's been talked about on other podcasts before, one of the more illogical moves in wrestling is the Irish whip. If you're in a fight and you go and you grab someone and you throw them, are they going to continue to run? And then, so I think the Irish whip to me is one of the more sillier things. I don't know if that's really answering the question quite as well as it could have. But that's my thought when it comes to that. Favorite beer from Wrestling Under the Influence? Again, a question from Ken. I think this may have been the very first Wrestling Under the Influence, and it was actually an episode of Craft Beerkins that I did with my friend Tom. And this was years ago, but I took the audio from that video and made it into a Wrestling Under the Influence as well. And I think it was the very first, and I'm pulling it up so I don't, not that I don't, I wanted to remember the manufacturer, the brewer of the beer, but the beer was Death by Coconut, and I gave it a 4.25 on my beer app, Untapped, and I thought I saved that picture, but look, oh, here it is. By Oscar Blues Brewery. It was a 6.5% alcohol by volume. It was a coconut, chocolate coconut beer. And it was really, really good. I've had it a couple of times since then, but this was, gosh, back probably 2016, 2017. And I think the other reason why this one is memorable to me and why I liked it, not just because of the beer, but Death by Coconut, we tied in Jimmy Superfly Snuka being hit in the head by the coconut by Rowdy Piper on the episode of Piper's Pit back in 1984. A very memorable moment in my early days as a wrestling fan. Final question from Ken is, Who should be the next celebrity to be in the Hall of Fame? This is an easy one, and I've been saying this one probably since they announced the celebrity wing, and that's Cyndi Lauper. To me, the whole rock and wrestling connection and the big kickoff of Hulkamania and women's wrestling, even with Wendy Richter, it got a resurgence, and I think a lot of that had to do with Cyndi Lauper's involvement. I was, you know, a wrestling. I was watching wrestling by this point, but I wasn't diehard. I was getting into it. I'd been watching World Class, starting to watch the WWF, and I remember Cyndi Lauper was on Piper's Pit, and I had the Girls Just Want to, or She's So Unusual cassette, and again, I love Cyndi Lauper. This is the MTV era, and so the fact that she's not in, and I don't know if there are extenuating circumstances on her end as to why she's not in. I can't imagine why WWE wouldn't have already inducted her, but I certainly think that the celebrity wing, as much as people criticize it, to me, it's not legit without the likes of Cyndi Lauper in there. So she would definitely be my first pick, and really at this point, I mean, other than I'm trying to think of other celebrities that maybe down the road going in there. It seems like a lot of the big celebrities that they've had go in, from previous WrestleManias or previous involvement in the events and stuff, has fallen into place. So Cyndi Lauper for sure, and she'd be the first female celebrity to be inducted, because I don't think, unless, is Maria Menounos in? I don't remember if she's a member of the Hall of Fame or if she's just been active with the Hall of Fame ceremony itself. So, but I definitely think Cyndi deserves that spot. Final question coming from my buddy, my friend, my former tag team partner, Heath Hatton. When is your next wrestling match, and how come you never put anyone over? Well, again, this here is one of the reasons why my arm. Um, I walked away from Stride and from ring announcing anywhere. I've had offers. I've had actually several offers to announce shows or be a part of shows, and I've turned them down since April of 2023. I, I don't know. I never want to say never, but I also realistically want to say that I'm 50. I'm almost 51. Obviously, with this thing going on, and who knows if it's going to need surgery, and I would not anticipate any kind of return to any kind of wrestling, especially in the ring, anytime soon. I've enjoyed the break. I miss the wrestlers and I miss the fans, but I don't miss. There are things about it that I can't really explain, that I don't miss about it. So for now, I'm happy. I'm happily. I don't know if retired is the right word, but I'm happily on the sidelines watching, following along on social media, and doing that, doing this podcast. But yeah, I'm just, I can't imagine. I've had my last match, but I also at this point can't imagine wrestling again, because it would have to be with the right people, the right company, and quite frankly, I don't know that I would get involved too far into something with a storyline or anything like that without Tyler, without Heath Hatton being involved with it, because I do feel like he was always an advocate for me when he would ask me to wrestle, and would always make sure that it was with people that were not going to hurt me. And I'm always worried about hurting myself or hurting someone else in the process. So if my last match was in May of 2022 against Heath Hatton, then that was one hell of a way to go out, and I have nothing to be ashamed of, other than the way I look in the ring. But it was a hell of a run. It was a hell of a ride, and from 2012 to 2022, 10 years. There was a little bit of a gap in there, but being a part of wrestling, local independent wrestling, I guess till 2023 really, but the in-ring stuff was 2012 to 2022. I'm happy with that. I'm proud of it, and I'm grateful, most importantly, for it. From Heath Hatton, who I know, was being funny with the how come you never put anyone over. I really thought I was putting him over at the show in Marion that we did, the match that we had when we went into it, and we've told that story before, so you can go listen in the archives. But um, I've always had fun. I will always continue to be grateful for all the opportunities that I've had in wrestling, whether it was to announce or be a referee somewhere or get in the ring and wrestle. And the guys that I got in there with who not only put me over, but also made sure that I was safe and didn't hurt myself or didn't get anyone else hurt in the process. So I'm grateful and I'm thankful. And I'm grateful and thankful for you as well. Thank you for checking out this week's episode. Again, Hulkamania. What if Hulk Hogan didn't exist? Who would have led that charge? We're going to be running down our 6 picks, each of us, next week, right here on the My 123 Cents podcast. So in the meantime, weigh in and let me know. And be sure to look out again for the announcement about the Royal Rumble giveaway, the Royal Rumble raffle, if you will, lack of a better word there. Friends, thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and or watching this week. We will talk again soon. Have a great week and stay warm out there.